All right, y'all. It is time to shine. It is time to shine. We are back for another very special episode of the Run the Jewelz podcast show and vidcast series. I'm your host, King Jewelz, Julian Smart Rimple here. We appreciate all of our smart jewels that are listening in, whether you're listening exclusively behind the scenes on Wisdom, or even if you're on Twitter Spaces with us to be able to participate in our live Q&A dialogue for my very special guest today. We appreciate you as a Smart Jewel listener. If this is your first time joining us, and if you are just finding out about the RTJ show, we are a lifestyle show that was created to spread inspiration to young professionals and millennial entrepreneurs who want to learn wisdom on how to shine brighter in their careers or their businesses. And so if you are a millennial, we appreciate you rocking with us today. If you are a Gen Zer, we salute you. But even if you are a baby boomer, we still have love for our baby boomers that are out there. We thank you for listening in for today's episode, you all. But we are on all podcast streaming platforms. If you want to take a look and see what work we put in over the last 3 seasons of the podcast show and vidcast series, take a listen to us. You can subscribe and listen on any podcast streaming platform at the Run the Jewelz podcast. You'll see the cover art with my face on it, hosted by Julian Smart Rimple. And you can take a listen to our previous episodes from season 1 all the way now to season 4, you all. And so shout out again to our Wisdom and Twitter Space listeners. If you have any questions at any time for my very special guests who we're going to get ready to bring on to the stage, you can list them in the comment section below, you all. We have a live Q&A show that we are about to take part in. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask those and we'll get to them shortly. If you're in Wisdom or Twitter, you can feel free to come onto the stage and ask my guests any questions, and they'll do their best to answer them as we are live. Finally, if you're interested in being a guest on the RTJ show for our next season, if you are a dynamic king or a queen that has a phenomenal testimony, you are literally a trailblazer in your industry, or even if you are a business entrepreneur or business owner that has a phenomenal product or service, click the link that we're putting in the comment section below in order to see if you have what it takes. Our team looks through interest forms on a regular seasonal basis. And so if you have what it takes, you'll be reached out to by myself or one of our team members to book you for a future episode. Those are all of my housekeeping for our episode today. Thank you again for rocking with us. We are diving into a very popular subject for myself and many of our travelers and travelpreneurs that we interview, and that also you all who may be listening, maybe travel ambassadors, travelpreneurs, or just you love to travel. Literally, you're travel experts or travel lovers. But we're going to be talking today about what to know when applying for international visas. Visas is a very important process when it comes to traveling that many people are not informed about, or they literally do not know that you need something extra outside of your passport to travel to most of the international countries and continents abroad outside of your country that you live in or your continent that you reside on. And so definitely feel free to share and like and subscribe to us. And we are about to go all the way in with my very special guest. I met this queen by way of Realist Community. Shout out to Monty and the Realist Community on Facebook and IG that shows content creators how to create reels consistently while also having a community and a tribe to support you throughout your content creation process. And so I met this queen through our community group and literally told her that she is doing her thing when it comes to her business and also her service that she provides for world travelers who need help on their visa process or even just in being consulted on traveling, and told her I had to have her as a guest. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to my very special guest, Amma, who goes by the name of Amarachi. Is that the right way that I said it, Amma?
Yes, you did.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm pronouncing the Queen's name correctly. We're on the line here today for our episode with Ama, who is BTG Immigration Consulting. And Ama, tell us a little bit about where you're originally from, Ama, where your hometown is, where you're streaming with us today, and then also why is this an important subject to educate our listeners on, Ama?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Julian. It's been so great to connect with you. So without further ado, my name is Amarachi. I'm originally from Nigeria, which is in West Africa. I immigrated to Canada almost 13 years ago. I can't believe it's coming up to 13 years, and went to school to study psychology and currently a registered Canadian immigration consultant. Been a consultant for the past 2.5 years. Kind of started during the pandemic, and things kind of shut down. So I guess I'm just kind of getting onto the other side. And in regards to why I do what I do and why it's important, Canada seems to be the dream for a lot of people right now. And to have trusted people give you sound advice and sound legal help, it's very paramount because there's so many scammers out there. There's so many people playing with people's emotions and playing with people's feelings, and they know that they can do anything to scam people. So I'm here to tell you, like, we can go through this process, but it doesn't have to cost you everything in your bank account, or we don't have to do this process where it's so tiring and grueling and gruesome, right? I'm here to give you that hassle-free service that you deserve, but walk you through the process, but also to remind you that there isn't any shortcut to life. We all have to go through the process, but I'll be there to support you every step of the way. So that's pretty much all I do in a nutshell.
I love it. And shout out again to West Africa. We always give a big up to the motherland. Shout out to Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, and even Togo and Benin. We definitely always interview guests from the motherland. By way, of course, you're in Canada right now, so we still
I am.
will acknowledge Canada, but big up to West Africa and all the Nigerians and Ghanaians. But I know we talk a ton about travel on our show, which is an excellent subject for you because, again, you are a world traveler and you also are an international citizen. And so, like, talk to us about, like, how was the process in getting into Canada? And even for those who may not know about when you travel from, let's say, the eastern side of the world where Asia and Africa are coming to the western side, of course, where Europe and the US and Canada especially are, like, how was the difference in traveling across time zones before you planted in Canada?
Absolutely. So obviously the first step in coming to any country is to go through your visa process. And so because I immigrated at a very young age, I was very privileged to have the support of my parents, most especially my dad, walk me through the process. And we actually use like immigration consulting agent, like organization to walk us through the process. So the process starts by you get admission into a school, but because um in Nigeria, for example, you finish school at 16, whereas in this part of the world, at 16, you're not done your secondary school. So by 16, I was ready to go to university. They looked at my application and they were like, you should not be in university. So to cut the story short, I ended up having to redo my grade 12 again. I went to a little city in northern BC called Fort St. John. While I was very upset about redoing my grade 12 again, I definitely saw the benefit of just getting myself acclimatized into this new environment. So I'd kind of done a little bit of research and I kind of knew that, okay, Canada had different weathers, different seasons, different time zones, but nothing can prepare you for whatever it is until you actually get there. But fast forward, before I got to Canada, I had to do biometrics. I also had to do medicals. So medicals is where you go and you get a physical examination of yourself, just to make sure that you're not coming into their country with any sort of major sickness or illness that can be a burden to the government. So once that was all done, the organization actually handled a lot of my process. So we pretty much just like followed through the steps and paid them the funds for each part of the step. And once I got the admission to the school, it was just to buy my flight ticket, right? So I hopped on the plane, said goodbye to my parents, said goodbye to my family, said goodbye to everything I knew to start this life here. On getting to Canada, Fort St. John, BC, I landed myself in maybe one of the whitest city you ever visit in Canada, right? So it was very white on every level. I was probably like the group we were probably only the black people there, so I always had people walk up to me and stare at me and try and touch my braids and, all of that fun stuff that people do when they see people that are a bit different. And, it took a while, but it wasn't a um, major adjustment for me, right? Like I'm always just a very curious person, and we were very thankful and very privileged to have traveled out of the country before getting to Canada. So it wasn't like this was like my first time being out of my country. But there were certain things that it took me a while to just even understand or, realize and be like, oh, this is how life is here now. And so, yeah, I just embraced it all. I took it all in. But I also didn't lose a part of who I was, right? Because that was important to me to hold on to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a major shifting coming from one side of the equator to the other, or even coming from the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere. And we just applaud you for taking that leap of faith. And also, even as you mentioned, having to redo your 12th grade in order to make sure you were ready to take the next step of your journey. And so shout out again to all of those who are world travelers that transition from one side of the hemisphere to the next. But we're going to give you a quick commercial break as we highlight our VIP sponsor for today. Each and every episode, we highlight our VIP sponsor or affiliate that we partner with for our season's episodes. If you are a business owner or an entrepreneur that wants to highlight your business, product, or service on our show, you can take a look after we show who our sponsor highlight video is to sign up to be a part of our VIP sponsorships. So let's take a look, you all, and see who our VIP sponsor is for today's episode. Let's take a look. So shout out again to our VIP sponsor for today's episode. Comes from none other than ExpressVPN. For those who are travelers, you of course should know about the importance of having a VPN to tap into your country's IP or their network. And so you can receive a free 30-day VPN by clicking on the link that we're putting in the comment section below for ExpressVPN. Our team uses this VPN. It's very stable. You're even able to literally pay less than $20 a month after, of course, your free 30-day that you'll receive just from being a Smart Jewel listener. But definitely tap in with ExpressVPN, especially if you are a remote worker or a world traveler. So that's our VIP sponsor for today. But back to you, Ama. We definitely wanted to pay homage to our affiliate, ExpressVPN,
Mm-hmm.
today. But
Mm-hmm.
stay with that last point you were speaking about when it came to literally being an outsider, is what we call here in the U.S., but coming to Canada as a queen coming from Nigeria, from West Africa, and then you see people that don't look like you. Like, talk about that
Mm-hmm.
first, like, shell shock experience, even from your perspective. We know what you said the Canadians' perspective was in seeing your small group of citizens that were coming from West Africa. But how was it for you, though, in seeing people that, of course, were more of the lighter complexion, the lighter persuasion?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, it wasn't really different, but I think it was a realization that you're no longer the majority, you're now the minority, right? Because coming from where I'm coming from, we're all the same, right? Like, yes, I'm light skinned, but a lot of people would know that I was Nigerian, maybe based on my name or based on, similar traits. But coming here, you realize, oh, by the way, you're no longer a majority, you're a minority, right? And so I think at the beginning, because I was still like in a homestay, everything still kind of felt like very sheltered. Like the school that I went to for my grade 12 was the school where all the international students went. So I think in that aspect, the school was already kind of used to having a lot of people of color from all over the world because that was the only school that it had that we could go to, right? But I think in the community, right, we did a lot of like events and activities. Like for example, February is Black History Month, and so to be able to celebrate that, we had different cultures represented, different attires, and they asked me to wear my native attire, which at first I was going to say no, but I ended up doing it. But you could just tell like the look people gave you. So I think at the beginning it was definitely not as noticeable, besides the fact that I was a minority. I think it was after I finished high school that I began to realize a lot of those subtle differences. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a major difference in itself, especially when it comes to having an open mindset for the transition that you made. And even like I know you were hitting on some terms that people may not know about, especially that don't travel. I know I had a homestay family when I traveled to Korea to teach English, but tell people who may not know about homestay, like what is a homestay and why are they important when you are traveling or even transitioning into a new country?
Absolutely. So a homestay is pretty much like, I think it's easier to just say like a room and board, but you're basically living in a house, typically a family house, and then they kind of rent a room to you and you pay like a fee to them, and then they also feed you. So they kind of provide like your basic needs, right? They're there to kind of guide you, they're there to direct you, but most importantly, you have a place to stay. And I think for an international student that is just living, especially at a young age, it's important to stay in a homestay because then you don't have to figure out a lot of all the unknowns by yourself. Like you're doing it with someone that has already lived in the system or has already like that has a lot of experience doing it, and it just gives you like a little bit of an upper hand to kind of see how things work and see how things function and not have to be worried about finding so many things or where to get different things, right? Because it's overwhelming to move already as it is. So the last thing you want is to have to figure out, okay, where do I go grocery shopping? What do I do? All of that. So the homestay pretty much kind of provides all of that for you. But I moved 13 years ago, right? So I know that things have obviously changed now, but it's kind of the same idea when it comes to homestays where you're pretty much staying in someone's house and you almost become like a part of their family depending on the kind of relationship that you end up building with your host family.
No, you're right on point right there, Queen. I know my homestay families, I stayed with two separate ones when I was in Korea teaching, and they gave me
Hmm.
literally the blueprint and also the radius of what was around me, took me to go grocery
Exactly.
shopping, took me
Mhm.
to a lot of the facilities that we had to teach in. And so shout out to all the host families or even homestay families that make people transition or even temporary stay more easy and also more seamless for those who are planted in your country. And so stay
That's
with
right.
that point too. Stay with that point too, Amma. I know Wisdom listeners or Twitter Space listeners, if you have any questions for Amma, feel free to come on to the stage. We'll let you ask any questions of her with this exclusive Q&A session. But Amma, I know I wanted to definitely dive into the visa process, because a ton
Mhm.
of people that I talk to, even that have traveled abroad, they do not know how important the visa process is in researching it before you even get to the country, before you even purchase your plane ticket, or even before you go through immigration. And so, like, talk to people about why is the visa process important to research, and also know the visa process for each country that you are wanting to visit or even to live in.
Well, without a doubt, right? The visa process is important because without the visa, you cannot come into a lot of the countries. That's just like the plain basic way to describe this. But the visa process is important because you need to make sure that you're following the steps. These countries have listed out steps and procedures for you that if you don't actually adhere to, you might be getting a refusal. And so many people get upset, or so many people get frustrated that they're getting refused. While it sucks, my question usually to them is, did you follow the steps? And sometimes they'll be like, yes. And sometimes they'll be like, no, not really. And it's like, there you go. Like the checklist they provide for you is specific to you, right? So a lot of countries, based on where you're from, will determine what kind of checklist that you need in addition to the general checklist, right? So when you want to go to a country, for me, for example, I deal with Canadian immigration. So I have people message me and say, I want to come to Canada. And to that I say, that's great. What would you like to come to Canada to do? Would you like to come to study? Would you like to come to work? Would you like to come to visit? Would you like to come to immigrate, right? Because there's some, like, for you, you need to decide your why. Like, what are you coming here to do? Once you know what you're coming here to do, then we can figure out the visa application process. But sometimes a lot of people just want the process to go quick. It's like when you put your food in the microwave and you can stop it for like 5 seconds. You can't do that to your visa application. If your visa application asks you for proof of funds, and they've given you a specific figure that you need to have, you can't come and say, oh, I have 500 less than this proof of funds, and expect that they're still going to give you your visa, right? But the most important thing also is adhering to the rules of your visa. So many people try and do things that they're not supposed to do with the wrong visa. You come in with a visiting visa, you are not allowed to work. If you want to work, you're supposed to switch your visa, right? But so many people try and find loopholes, but then once they catch you, right, that's where the challenge comes, right? So I always tell people, if we're going to go through this process, let's get it right first and foremost, and let's get it right once and for all. But it's also important that you do your own due diligence, right? Because if you meet a consultant or whoever that helps with immigration or lawyer, and you haven't done your own due diligence, you're not doing yourself any service. You're doing yourself a disservice by not doing your research, right? Because you need to make sure that you know what it is that you're coming, you're going through. And you need to know the process. You need to know the steps, and you need to know that you have met the requirements before you even think about applying for a visa, right? It's not just I want to go to a country. There are steps, and then you have to pay for the visa. Like, it's not free. Nothing is free, right? So you do have to pay for the application process.
Yeah, you gotta stack those coins up, like Amma is telling you. You can't just think that you just purchased a flight and you have a passport, and oh, by the way, you're gonna get your stamp of approval at the immigration portions at the airports. You have to have visas a lot of times to get into certain countries. And so, like, Amma,
Hmm.
stay with that category. Like, I know I've researched different categories for the visas, but what are the categories for most visas that you can apply for in even going into Canada? And then, like, what are some of the ways that people can get into those categories for those who are traveling abroad?
Hmm. So typically for Canadian visas, we have the like the study permits, which are for students that want to come to school here. There's the visiting visa with people that just want to come and visit to like explore. There is the business visa, that's for businesses that want to come here for like some sort of conferences or shows or exhibitions, those kind of things. There is the workers permit, which is the foreign workers that want to come to Canada to work. And there's the permanent resident, which is not necessarily a visa, but if you're out of the country, you will get a permanent resident visa to come into the country to finish your landing process. So typically in Canada, we see a lot of study permits. So the people that want to come to study, we see a lot of work permits. So the people that want to come to work, and we see a lot of permanent residents, people that want to immigrate to Canada, because you can actually immigrate to Canada from your country without actually being in Canada, as long as you meet the eligibility requirements. In the past 3 to 4 years, we have seen business visas increase. Like there was like a conference. I think the UN had a conference in August, right? So we definitely saw the business visas increase, but typically it's usually the study permit, the work visa, and the permanent resident like immigrating to Canada. And in terms of how to apply, again, like I said, it just depends on what it is that you want to do. Like obviously, if you want to come to if you want to come to Canada to school, you do have to apply to a school first. So first and foremost, you have to decide, okay, what do I want to study? What province do I want to live in, right? Because Canada has 11 provinces, and the 11 provinces all have different weathers, right? So do you want where it's warm, or do you want where it's cold? Are you okay with either? Like what are you looking for? Is community important to you? Are you looking at job offers? Are you looking at the cost of living? So there's so many factors to consider when you want to apply for school. And then once you've gotten your school admission, you then apply for your study permit. But in your study permit application, you need to prove to the officer that you're going to be a like you're a strong student, like you're a strong candidate. You need to prove to them why they need to give you this study permits. Like you're going to be a good contribution to the economy. You're not just going to come here and just mess up your school or not go to school, right? Because there are conditions that you have to follow as an international student, or even as a temporary resident. Whenever they give you a visa, there's always a remark on the visa. It will typically say must leave by, or not allowed to work. It will say whatever the conditions are. So you want to make sure you pay attention. In regards to work visa in Canada, it's a little bit different in that for you to be able to work in Canada, you need to get an LMIA, which is a labor market impact assessment. So that's pretty much what the company has to apply for. So the employers are telling the Canadian government that there are no Canadians or permanent residents that can do the job currently. And so because of that, they want to expand their reach and choose people from outside the country. So with the LMIA process, you do have, for you to get a job in Canada, you do have to have an LMIA that is approved. Once you have the LMIA that is approved, then we use the LMIA to get your work permit, and then that work permit will have your name, and then it will tell you the conditions as well. The thing I want to mention about LMIA is you do have to be very, very careful. There's so many scammers out there when it comes to job offers. So you do need to make sure that you have verified your job offer like 110 times if possible, because you don't want to fall into the trap of getting scammed. You don't want to fall into the trap of being banned from coming into Canada, because Canadian governments will find out. And once they find out, they will ban you for 5 years or up to 10 years. So it is your responsibility to make sure that before you sign any document, I always say, make sure you've gone through the fine print. Make sure you read and understand and you know why you're signing what you're signing. Don't sign a document when you were not aware of the terms and conditions. And then lastly, when it comes to immigrating to Canada, there are different ways and different paths to immigrate to Canada, but the most popular one will be through the Express Entry. Express Entry houses so many immigration programs under it. So, yeah.
Oh no, you dropping a ton of jewels right there, Queen. Literally, Amma is walking myself and you all who are listening through the visa process, especially to get into Canada. What she is saying is very similar to other countries, but as she mentioned at the beginning, every country has its own separate visa process. And so The rules may apply different in each country, but typically uniformly, it is going to be very similar. And so with Amma pointing out that last point, let's talk about when you outstay your visa. Like Amma said, we see that as a very popular subject in the U.S., and I'm sure it is right to the north in Canada where you are. Like, what typically do you see happen to people that you've come across, or even clients or staff or coworkers or even family or friends? Like, when you outstay your visa, like, what is the process, and why should people try to prevent themselves from having to go through that next process after the visa expires?
So typically when you overstay your permit, obviously you're putting yourself under scrutiny, you're putting yourself under investigation. But what people don't realize is if you overstay your permit, depending on how long has passed, you still have time to go and pay to restore your status. But what we find is like a lot of people don't actually know that they can restore their status, and so they stay here illegally, hoping and thinking and praying that they are going to get like permanent residence. But if you do something and the Canadian government finds out, that's instant deportation, right? They will issue a deportation order, and once they issue a deportation order, it's harder for you to come back into any other country, into any country. It's not impossible, it's just very challenging because now it's on your file. And every time you want to apply to any country, because they kind of all share like database to an extent, so they will see it there. It's not impossible, it's just your application will have to be stronger. So it's best that you don't. And in the event that you do, I understand that honest mistakes happen, and sometimes you are fearing going back to your home country because of whatever the conditions that are going through. But there are different ways that you can continue to stay here legally, as long as you are doing the research. Like, Canada has made it possible so anybody and everybody can kind of come in, as long as, again, you meet the requirements. So it's up to you to, you've overstayed your study permit or your work visa or whatever. Instead of staying low key under and just trying to stay under the radar, you want to be looking for ways to restore the status back to either because you can only restore your status to what you had before. So if you were a student, you cannot restore your status to a worker because you were not a worker before. You can restore your status back to being a student, or if that's not feasible, you can restore your status to be a visitor. But it's very important that you make sure you don't overstay, because that would affect you coming into the country in the future, but it will also affect you getting permanent residence and citizenship, because you've shown them that you're not one to follow instructions, and so they cannot trust you enough to give you permanent residence, because then they don't feel like you're going to follow the rules or you're going to be quote unquote a good citizen, right? So it is very, very important. I always tell my clients, I'm like, if one thing, let's go through the process the right way. For me, I always tell them I'm here to support you every step of the way, but I cannot help what I don't know. If you don't tell me or if you don't inform me, I cannot support you in the right direction. So it's very important that you do your due diligence. If you're a person that feels like you forget, write your expiry date in your calendar, add it to your calendar. So a few months before, it's reminding you that your study permit or whatever the permit is going to expire, and make sure you have a plan B for when that expires besides staying illegally. So for me, those are the kind of things I would say to people, or I've said to people.
No, you're dropping a ton of jewels right there, Queen. I didn't even know that you can't like reapply for the same visa, as you said, or re-up the permit, like you mentioned, based off of the one that you came in with. You can't apply for another one until that one.
Well, you can if you can if you didn't overstay, but if you've overstayed that visa, then it's a very different process, right? Because now they've given you one visa, because you can't be a student and be a visitor at the same time. It cannot work, and you can't be a student and be a worker, but you can be a worker and then you can decide that, it's not working out to be a student, but you have to apply before this work permit actually expires, because then if that work permit expires, you don't have a status to be in Canada legally to even do anything, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just telling myself and you all, you gotta not get to the point where your visa expires. You all, just like
Yeah.
in the states. In the states, you can't get to a point where you literally are trying to overstay and think that you'll still have the same flexibility and privileges. Because once that visa shows that you basically have overstayed, you already heard Amma say, and we've seen the results, especially on the western side of the world, that you are getting kicked out and you potentially can be revoked from even traveling back to that particular country. And so like
Mm-hmm.
stay with that point too, Amma, when it comes to the permanent stay. I hear a lot of travelers that especially that do travel blogs and travel channels that speak about they sometimes end up falling in love with the country that they were staying in temporarily with their visas, and then they want to stay. And so, like, talk to us about, like, in Canada specifically, because that's where you are right now. Like, if someone wants to permanently stay in Canada, and also, let's say they are coming from the motherland where you came from, or even coming from Asia, like, what are some of the steps that one would have to take to come from the east to west?
Absolutely. And so you to stay in Canada permanently, there are different options. So the first one is if you're in a relationship with a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, or you're in a common law partnership, you can stay in Canada, but again, you do have to meet the eligibility requirements. So for your common law relationship, you have to have lived with the person for a year, up to a year. So for a lot of people, what they end up doing is they come in as a visitor, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is right or wrong. I'm just they're telling you what people do. They have, like, I guess, boyfriends or girlfriends that are here that are already permanent residents and citizens, and so they come in as a visitor's visa, and then they do the marriage ceremony. And so we put in an application called a spousal sponsorship application. The second way for you to come into Canada to stay permanently is if you put in if you go through the excess entry. So if you have work experience from your home country and you meet the eligibility requirements, we can put in an application under the Federal Skilled Workers Class. It's based on a point system, and so you can also immigrate to Canada and stay permanently. Your third option is if you're already in Canada, you might as well try and find an employer that is willing to give you the labor market impact assessment, like I mentioned earlier on, because that allows you to work in Canada for 2 years, then apply for your permanent resident. Other option is to come in as a student, which, it's usually the way we recommend to a lot of people. If you're already in Canada and you feel like, okay, I want to stay here permanently, then we can say, okay, do you want to go to school to study? If that's the case, then you find an admission, because the beauty of studying in Canada is once you're done studying, you get a postgraduate work permit that allows you to work. Once you've worked for 1 year, if you have 1 year work experience, you can then apply for your permanent resident. So there are different ways and different paths to come to Canada, or we can apply to a provincial nominate to you can apply to a province, because the provinces in Canada also offer their own immigration programs. But again, you do have to meet the eligibility requirements. So you can't just decide that when you come to a country, you like the country and the country is so beautiful and you want to stay. That's great. But remember, there are rules that you have to follow and abide to be able to stay. So if you know that that's what you want to do, have that at the back of your mind, because in Canada, there's absolutely nothing wrong in having both a temporary resident and putting in an application for a permanent resident. It's actually okay. It's called dual intent. So you can actually do that. A lot of people don't realize that because they think they're doing something wrong, but there's nothing wrong. Say if you're going to school, but just remember that everything costs money, right? I think a lot of people just rather not, because you're already paying for that temporary resident visa. And then if you're going to start the permanent resident application, you're going to have to pay again. But if that's something that is comfortable for you, you can absolutely have a temporary resident visa and then start the process for your permanent resident visa. So application, sorry. So yeah, you can definitely have dual intents in Canada.
Yeah, that's a ton of jewels right there. You all, it's important to know all of your options that Amma is dropping
Mhm.
on us for this episode today, because there's tons of options, but you just have to ask and also seek so that you can find what works
Exactly.
best for your situation. And so before we let you go, like talk to us about the scammers, because I see a ton of scams in traveling abroad where people have like a business that you can get your passport, you can get your visa in less than 5 days or in less than 10 days for $1,500 to $2,500. Like, talk to us about like how can people avoid being scammed for their visa process or even renewing their passports, and then also like how much does it actually cost for some of the different tiers in Canadian visas to purchase, just so people can know a ballpark figure.
Hmm. So first and foremost, I always tell people, make sure you do your due diligence. So when it comes to Canadian immigration, only a registered Canadian immigration consultant, an immigration lawyer, or a paralegal is legal licensed to give you immigration advice and charge you. Anybody else cannot and should not. So the thing about scammers is there are all these ghost agents, they call them, or ghost consultants that, come up with all these cool things, packages and give to people. Because the thing is, it's not hard to go on the Canadian website to find the information. That's great. But remember that the information is just general, it's just basic. There's still so much more than just the general information in the Canadian website. So people need to do their due diligence. The scammers are not backing down. They're coming up with packages, they're selling to people's fears, they're selling to people's pain, they're selling to people's emotions, But before you do anything, like even for me right now, if you decide to retain me, you have the right to ask me for my membership number, and I'm supposed to give it to you. So that is the first thing that you want to do when you find an immigration consultant, is ask the immigration consultant, are you licensed with the college? Do you have a membership number? What is your membership number? Because you can go on the college website and you can find your immigration consultant. So first and foremost, whoever you're dealing with, if the person is not licensed, run. I say it again and I'll say it again. There's so many people that have sadly been scammed, been ripped off. If anybody is trying to tell you that they can get you to Canada faster than the process, that is not true. Nobody can guarantee the process, but we can guarantee that we will help you submit an accurate application. So that's the first step when it comes to ensuring that your immigration consultant is real, is go on the college website and you do your own due diligence as well. For example, you should not be paying for a job offer, but if you have somebody that is offering you a package to say, if you pay this amount, I'll give you a job, run. A job offer in Canada is free. The company is the one that pays the LMIA fees. You are not, there's so many things that you have to do your own due diligence. You have to. I cannot stress it enough. Nairaland is not your immigration consultant. YouTube is, those are not immigration, those are not places to get sound immigration advice. Yes, there are people on YouTube that are doing great stuff, but just make sure that whoever you're listening to, you verify the person. Forums are not the place to get legal advice from. Even for me right now, I have so many people message me on Instagram and I tell them, thank you for contacting me, but I would not be providing any legal advice here, because you want to make sure that whoever's case you're handling, you've done research, because it's not one size fits all. When it comes to prices, it's hard to speak on the pricing because pricing is going to vary based on where you are in terms of the location, how long you've been doing this, your experiences, your expertise. But you can tell when something is off, right? Usually, typically, say for example, visiting visa will start anywhere from $800 Canadian dollars to about 1,500, 1,700, 1,800 thereabout. If somebody is charging you so much more than that for a visiting visa, the first thing you want to do is to ask again and be like, is this the standard price? Or you can go shopping, how we go window shopping. You can go immigration consulting shopping, because if you retain an immigration consultant, they are legally supposed to provide you with a retainer's agreement. And in the retainer's agreement, it shows you the breakdown of the cost that you're going to pay, right? So I cannot necessarily speak about the cost because everyone is going to charge differently. But at the same time, there is kind of like a bulk part of, like, if you're charging somebody a ridiculous amount for a service, then people, the red flags will start showing up and be like, no, that does not seem right. So I think ultimately it's still your own responsibility to do your due diligence. I have people reach out to me and they want to come to Canada, but they want to come to Canada quick. You cannot come to Canada quicker than the application process. The application process is the application process. And sadly, currently, we are experiencing a lot of backlogs, but the Minister of Immigration is working very, very hard to try and reduce those backlogs. But you cannot come faster than what they've put on there, right? So
Nah, Amma is literally showing you all, including myself, how to not get scammed out of your
mhm,
socks, as a lot of my elders say. Where literally you're putting all of your money to think that you can get into Canada or get into another country, and they tell you no, no, no when you go through the immigration, and literally they turn you all the way back, and you got to purchase that one-way flight back, looking like a straight chincha, herb,
yeah.
as we say with our team. Like, you got to be able to know the process, like Amma said,
Mhm,
so you don't get scammed. And so, I know you dropped a ton of jewels on that piece, especially in knowing literally where to go and also how to apply. And just like you said, the numbers are going to change based off of who you decide to go with to help you for your visa
mhm,
process. And we've
mhm,
come to the segment now, which is what we call our final jewels segment. You talked about a ton of information with our audience today. Shout out to our Wisdom and Twitter Space listeners catching us live for the Q&A. And you talked about how you came into Canada even as a youth, and now you've blossomed into being a queen as a business owner, and also is educating people on how to come into Canada for themselves. You talked about some of the pitfalls to look out for when you are going through the visa application or renewal process. And then you've also talked about how to not get deported or to get your name flagged where you can never come back to Canada for 5 to 10 years plus. Like, what would be a final jewel, Amma, that you would want to leave with our audience when it comes to the process for applying for visas? What would be a final jewel of wisdom you can leave for them?
I think before I give that final joke, I'll say the time to start your immigration process is now. I tell people that so many things are changing. Next year is going to be very competitive. So I always tell people the time to start is now. As a final joke before I leave, thank you again so much for this opportunity to be here, to speak, to share. One thing I'll say is trust the process. It might be long, it might be frustrating, it might not be anything you expected, but trust me, the reward will be far greater and far better than whatever it is that you're going through. But don't try and find shortcuts. There are no shortcuts to life. If there were shortcuts to life, I think we'll all be doing that. And just remember that the Canadian government wants you. Canada wants you. Canada is written for you. Canada is built on immigrants. We're literally the nation with the most immigrants in the whole world. And so I can say that happily and fully and confidently. But also, Canada only wants people that are going to contribute to the economy. Canada only wants people that are going to stand out. Canada only wants people that are going to that are going to make a difference. And so if you're in that waiting season, go and learn some skills. Go and learn anything that will be beneficial, anything that can add to you immigrating to Canada, because whatever you do, you're putting yourself out there, you're setting yourself apart from from the other candidates. And so the time to start is now, but trust the process and don't give up, because Canada awaits you. Like, we are waiting for you, we're expecting you, because we know that this country would not be able to survive and function without you beautiful people. So whenever you're ready, start now.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of family, that live in Toronto, and I think in
Mm-hmm.
Ontario, Trinidadian, and shout out to the Caribbean too. I know they just celebrated the Nottingham Carnival in Carabana.
Mm-hmm.
So literally Canada, a lot of folks are transitioning from the US, from Europe, even from the eastern side of the world. So you're right on point with that. And so, I know we'll have to bring you back for a part 2 so people can see the progress with the changes with visa processes, and also see how they can support your services. But let people know, how they can stay in touch with you. How can they reach out to you for consulting services, for your services, to get them into Canada? Those who are interested in leaving their country because of all the COVID foolishness and things of that nature, they like, I'm trying to come into Canada where Amma and the rest of the Canadians are. Like, let people know how they can stay in touch with you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at BTG Immigration, and you can also find me on TikTok at BTG Immigration. On Facebook, you can find me at BTG Immigration Consulting. And on Twitter, you can find me at my handle Amarachi. And then on LinkedIn, you can find me at my name, Amarachi Ibelebu. So those are the places you can find me. And in regards to retaining me, if you go on my Instagram page, there is a link in my bio, and the link in my bio takes you to like a link page that has the different links, and it shows you how to book a consultation and the steps that you need to go through. So, well, just reach out to me in my DMs. I'm always happy to answer questions that are not immigration related in my DMs. So, yes.
Absolutely. And Amma is active in her social. That's how I came across her. So just like I mentioned before, y'all go and for sure tag team and collaborate with Amma. She's very much so a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the not just immigration process, but even the visa to permanent resident process for those who are maybe looking to become a permanent resident in Canada specifically. And so shout out again to you, Amma. I know we always say a special prayer over our guests before they leave, just to thank them for coming on for the episode. And so for those who are listening, if you are still rocking with us, feel free to sow a seed with us. This is good soil that Amma has been blossoming and getting you ready to learn about the visa process. And so there's 2 ways to sow. We believe in sowing where you're able to reap. You can Cash App a donation to us at SMART, SMART, JEWELZ, or you can click the link that we're putting in the comment section to become a monthly Patreon with us, and even to support us by purchasing some of our merchandise that we've just released this season for the Shine collection for Smart Travel Apparel. And so definitely shout out to those who you see on the ticker that have already donated or have already partnered with us as a sponsor or a donor for our movement. But let's say a quick prayer over you, Amma, before we let you go, Queen. And thank you again for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Father God, I just want to thank you for Amma. I thank you for her voice of truth, and also for her voice of just being bold to show others the way to literally become citizens, even in Canada, all the way to being able to migrate and join what Canada has built up, like she said, of being very open to international immigrants coming over to Canada. And we thank you for her business and also for her services that she is providing others. We pray that you will allow it to blossom and allow it to get a surge of new clientele and also new partnerships and new opportunities just through her sharing her wisdom with us today on this podcast. We ask that you will bless her 100-fold in all of her endeavors, and we pray that you will bless us for continuing to open these doors for individuals like Amma to share their jewels of wisdom. I love you, Father. I praise you and I honor you, and it's in Jesus, Yeshua HaMashiach's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That's very sweet. I think a lot of people do that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Amma, for coming on, Queen. I know we'll be in touch to have you with a part 2, and we'll talk soon, Queen. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Julian. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna do some final jewels for thought. You heard from Amma. Literally, you have to do your due diligence. You can't trust someone to help you get to the water before you drink it. You have to be able to research and also know how the water tastes, what the temperature of the water is, and what is the process to get to that water or that water reservoir. And so you have to be able to do your part in order to travel. Do not just trust any company to provide a package to give you 100% access into that country. You do your due diligence. And so take a look and see what are some of our services that we provide for RTJ as we wind down for today's episode. So you can partner with us for those who are podcasters or content creators. If you want to reach new audiences, go to www.smartjewelsenterprises.org to sign up for a free 30-minute discovery session. You can listen to us on all podcast platforms at the Run the Jewelz podcast show, hosted by myself. Just search for the cover art that you see on the screen and see our episodes from season 1 all the way now to season 4, you all. We're taking our show global, going international, and so you can take a look to see how to shine and also how we are shining as we go to international countries and continents, sharing how to start a travel podcast and even showing you the jewels along the way. So take a look, and we'll see you all next episode.